What would you do if the people who raised you, the ones who told you family means everything, were the same ones who turned their backs when you needed them most? My name is Julia, and I never imagined that the moment I begged for my son's life would be met not with love or urgency, but with silence dressed in designer clothes. I wasn't asking for the world, just enough to keep my 6-year-old boy breathing. You see, I come from a family that values image over integrity, appearances over affection. My brother, the golden child, received a $2 million condo with ribbon on the keys. I, on the other hand, was handed polite dismissals and careful excuses until the day I stood in front of them with my son's medical file in hand. That day, I stopped being a daughter. But that's not where the story ends, because sometimes, when the world turns away, unexpected hands reach out, and when those who rejected you come crawling back, not out of love but out of loss, what do? This is the story of how I lost one family, found another, and became the kind of woman who doesn't just survive betrayal, she transforms it. I wasn't always the kind of person who expected nothing from anyone. There was a time I truly believed that if I just worked harder, stayed quiet, and made myself useful, I would eventually earn the love I was quietly begging for. That belief followed me from childhood into adulthood like a shadow. Quiet, persistent, always present. I'm 34 now. My name is Julia Tran, born and raised in San Jose, California, the first daughter of Eric and Leanne Tran. On the surface, we're the picture-perfect immigrant family, successful small business owners, immaculate home, 2 high-achieving children. But that picture was curated, not captured. What the world saw was a highlight reel. What I lived was something else entirely. My parents cared deeply about how we were seen. My father ran a popular Vietnamese home goods store, known for its custom, woodwork, and high-end clients. My mother, once a beauty queen in her youth, maintained that image of elegance well into her 50s. She hosted charity luncheons and garden parties, her smile always just right, her voice smooth but firm. From a young age, I understood that our family motto was unspoken, but clear. Appearances matter more than truth. And then there was my brother, Brandon. 2 years younger than me, effortlessly charming, talkative, and endlessly forgiven. He was the kind of boy who could break a window and get praised for his curiosity. The kind of teenager who crashed a car and was comforted for how stressful the day must have been. I, on the other hand, could come home with straight A's and be told I was simply doing what was expected. I used to think if I just outperformed the bar they set for him, they'd notice me. So I did. I studied, I skipped parties, I worked part-time at a local design studio while in high school. I got into UC Berkeley's architecture program on my own merit, while Brandon barely made it through a local business college, funded in full by our parents. When I graduated, I received a polite nod. When he passed a real estate licensing exam, there was a full dinner party with champagne and a custom cake that said future CEO. I eventually moved to Seattle, trying to build a life on my own terms. That's where I met Amir. He was smart, quiet, the kind of person who listens more than he speaks. An engineer by trade, but more of an artist at heart. We met at a home renovation conference. He was speaking on sustainable tech. I was giving a talk about emotional design in small spaces. Our worlds overlapped more than I expected. A year later, we were married in a small backyard ceremony with friends, music, and more love than I'd ever felt in my childhood home. My parents didn't attend. They said it was too rushed and unfortunate timing. In truth, I believe, it had more to do with the fact that Amir wasn't Vietnamese, and certainly not the high-profile doctor or lawyer they had imagined for me. Still, we built a life. Not flashy, but solid. I opened my own interior design firm with a small team of passionate women. Amir worked for a mid-sized tech firm that specialized in infrastructure. We rented a cozy home outside the city, filled it with color and noise. and love. And then came Leo, our son, our miracle. He had Amir's warm eyes and my stubborn streak. He loved dinosaurs, carrot cake, and sleeping with his socks on. He made every tired day feel worth it. We weren't rich, but we were content, and we made careful decisions. Except for one, the one that would come back to haunt me in the most painful way. Health insurance for small business owners is expensive. We were both self-employed, paying our own way, and premiums were crushing. Every year we debated it. Every year we told ourselves, next year, once we're a little more stable, and every year we gambled with our luck. Looking back, I know it was a mistake. But at the time, it felt like a risk we could control. After all, Leo was healthy, we were healthy, and we had savings. Enough for a rainy day. What we didn't know was how quickly that rain could become a storm. What we didn't realize was how unprepared we truly were, not just financially, but emotionally. Because no one tells you how much it hurts to ask for help from the same people who never truly saw you. And no one warns you that sometimes the family you were born into won't save you, not because they can't, but because they won't. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months when Leo collapsed, not because of a fight, just silence. The kind that becomes familiar. The kind that makes you think maybe you're better off without them. But when I was sitting in a hospital room clutching my son's hand, watching his tiny chest rise and fall with effort, I picked up the phone. I dialed the number I hadn't used in nearly a year, because somewhere, buried deep beneath years of disappointment, I still believed that maybe, just maybe, my parents could prove me wrong. I thought blood had to count for something. I was wrong. I didn't always resent Brandon. In fact, when we were kids, I adored him. He was this giggling little shadow that followed me everywhere, clumsy and lovable. I protected him from bullies, taught him how to ride a bike, helped him finish his book reports. For a while, I believed that if I loved him enough, maybe that warmth would extend to me. But children learn patterns fast, and I learned early that love in our house wasn't something you earned. It was something that was allocated. And in our family, Brandon had already been given the lion's share. It started with the small things. When I was 10, I won first place in the regional science fair. I remember staying up late for weeks building a working model of a wind-powered generator. I carried it home, buzzing with pride, hoping, just once, for a celebratory dinner or even a proud smile. My mother glanced at the certificate, nodded and said, "Of course, we expect nothing less." That same month, Brandon got a most improved ribbon in PE. My father took him to Baskin-Robbins for a sundae and posted a photo on his office wall. That pattern never changed. When I made honor roll, it was because I was the studious one. When Brandon passed a test, it was a family victory. When I stayed up all night studying for my AP exams, no one noticed. But when Brandon got a C in calculus, my mom called the school to discuss the grading rubric. Somehow, I became the one they relied on and the one they ignored in the same breath. The dependable daughter who didn't need praise. The self-sufficient girl who didn't require attention. My excellence became invisible because it was consistent. And consistent things, in my parents' world, were expected, not celebrated. In high school, it became even clearer. I applied for every scholarship I could find, and by senior year, I had secured nearly a full ride to UC Berkeley. I told my parents one evening over dinner, waiting for their reaction. My father grunted, barely looking up from his phone. My mother didn't even ask what I planned to study. She just said, "Berkeley's very liberal. Be careful who you become." 2 weeks later, Brandon was accepted into a private college no one had heard of, and they threw a party with balloons and a catered buffet. My aunts flew in from Texas. My mother made a toast. No one mentioned me. I remember crying once, just once, on my bedroom floor the night before I left for college. Not because I was scared to go, but because I was leaving with no goodbye. No support, not even a packed lunch. I boarded that Greyhound bus with 2 suitcases and a $200 check from my grandmother, who whispered, "Do well, Con. They'll see one day." I didn't believe her, but I smiled anyway. College was hard. Not because of the academics, I loved the work, but because I was alone. Truly alone. Other students got care packages, surprise visits, tuition support. I worked part-time at a cafe on weekends, ate ramen and eggs, and tutored underclassmen for cash. During breaks, I'd see Brandon's updates online. Spring break. In Cabo, his new car, branded clothes. He had dropped out of his first school, transferred, then took a gap year to figure things out. My parents funded every step of it, posting selfies with him at art museums and high-end steakhouses. I didn't get a single phone call. When I graduated, I sent them an invitation. They didn't come. My mother said flights were expensive, and my father had a work thing. Brandon posted a photo that same week from Hawaii, celebrating his birthday. I walked the stage alone. A classmate's mom hugged me and said, "Your parents must be so proud." I didn't have the heart to correct her. After college, I started freelancing as a designer, slowly building a reputation. It was hard. There were months when I didn't know how I'd cover rent, but I was finally doing something that made me feel alive. I met Amir during one of those lean months, and what struck me first wasn't his intelligence. It was the way he listened. Really listened. Like what I said mattered. It was such a foreign feeling I didn't know how to respond. He never asked why my family wasn't around. He just filled in the spaces they left behind. When I brought him home to meet my parents, the mood was cold before we even walked through the door. My mother gave him a once-over, then spent dinner asking if he had any plans to return to his country. Amir was born in Sacramento. My father made comments about practical careers when I talked about my design business. Brandon, of course, was exploring investment options at the time, burning through another business loan our parents had co-signed. Even after we got married, nothing changed. My mother told me my wedding dress was too plain. My father said our ceremony felt low budget. They didn't invite their friends. But when Brandon got engaged a year later to a fashion influencer, they rented a vineyard and hired a live string quartet. The engagement ring alone cost more than our entire wedding. By the time Leo was born, I had given up on expecting anything. They didn't visit the hospital, didn't send flowers, didn't even call. But they posted a throwback photo with Brandon. That same day, writing, "So proud of our son and all he continues to accomplish." I stared at that caption with Leo asleep in my arms, and something inside me finally cracked. It wasn't just the neglect. It was the ease with which they erased me, again and again. Amir tried to keep the peace. He'd say, "They're set, in their ways. Just give them time." But it wasn't time we needed. It was truth. It was acknowledgement. It was justice. I knew by then that I'd never get it. Not really. But I also didn't know how deep their indifference could run, until the day Leo fell, and I realized that even a dying child wasn't enough to shift their loyalty away from Brandon. That was the moment I finally understood. I wasn't just unseen. I was expendable. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of day you don't expect anything to go wrong. Leo had just gotten home from soccer practice. He was still in his little cleats, sweaty, cheeks flushed from running around, clutching a juice box in one hand and a dinosaur sticker in the other. Amir was making dinner, and I was answering emails, half listening to Leo humming in the hallway. Then I heard the sound, quick, sharp, the thud of something small hitting the hardwood floor. I turned just in time to see him curled on the ground, clutching his chest, gasping for air. My heart dropped. In that moment, everything blurred. My voice calling his name, Amir rushing over, the flash of panic in his eyes. We scooped Leo into the car, skipping the ambulance because we thought it would be faster. Amir speeding through red lights as I held our son in the back seat, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just hold on. Mommy's here." By the time we got to Seattle Children's Hospital, Leo's skin was pale and his breathing shallow. They rushed him into triage while I stood frozen, clutching his backpack. A nurse gently led me to a waiting room, but I couldn't sit. I paced. I stared at the floor. My fingers wouldn't stop trembling. After what felt like a lifetime, a doctor walked in. He was calm but serious, holding a clipboard and a file thick with test results. He didn't look like someone delivering good news. He asked us to sit, then said, "We've identified a serious congenital heart defect. It's rare, but in Leo's case, it's progressed quickly. He'll need emergency surgery to correct the valve and stabilize blood flow." Amir's face went blank. I could hear my own breath speeding up. "How soon?" I asked. "As soon as possible," the doctor said. "Ideally within the next 48 hours. The longer we wait, the more risk we take." Then came the number, $120,000. That was the estimate, covering the surgery, intensive post-op care, and follow-up treatments. I stared at him, not understanding at first. I kept thinking maybe he meant 12,000. But no, the decimal never moved. Amir spoke first. "We don't have insurance," he said quietly. "We were between plans. We thought we had time." The doctor nodded. "We'll do everything we can to help you find assistance. But this is the reality." I couldn't cry. I couldn't move. I felt like I had left my body. All I could think was, this is my fault. I should have pushed harder. I should have gotten that plan, even if it meant skipping groceries or losing clients. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his life depends on a number? That night, we made calls. We begged. We drained our savings, $28,000, gone in minutes. Our credit cards were near the limit from business expenses. Amir tried to apply for an emergency loan, but our self-employment income was too inconsistent. We put up a post online, explaining Leo's condition, asking for help. Friends shared it. A few strangers donated. But time wasn't on our side. Every hour brought Leo closer, to the danger zone. Every beep from the heart monitor felt like a countdown. At 2 a.m., sitting beside Leo's hospital bed, watching his chest rise and fall in uneven rhythm, I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I hadn't used in nearly a year. My mother's. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering. Then I called. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was light, rehearsed. "Julia, what a surprise." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Leo's in the hospital. He needs emergency surgery. We don't have the money. Please, I'm not asking for everything. Just help us cover part of it. We'll pay you back." There was silence on the line, then a sigh. "Well, that's very unfortunate," she said, as if I had told her we'd run out of milk. "But, timing is everything. Your father and I just helped Brandon with the down payment on his new condo. You know how expensive real estate is these days." I sat up straight, my entire body stiffening. "This isn't about real estate. This is about Leo, your grandson. He might die, Mom." Her voice hardened. "Julia, this sounds very dramatic. I'm sure the hospital has programs, or perhaps Amir's family can assist. It's not appropriate for you to guilt trip us over financial planning." My throat burned. "You spent $2 million on a luxury condo for Brandon. And we budgeted for it," she said flatly. "You made your choices, Julia. You married outside your culture, moved away, took on risky work. You're responsible for your own outcomes." I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not while Leo was lying in that room, hooked up to machines. "Please," I whispered. "He's just a little boy." "I'm sorry," she said, "but we can't help." And then she hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood up, walked back into Leo's room, and sat, down next to his bed. I held his tiny hand in mine, and something inside me shifted. The last illusion was gone. There would be no rescue, no last-minute gesture of love. My parents had chosen silence over their own grandchild. The next morning, Amir tried to console me, but I was done hoping. I told him we would sell everything: my laptop, my design tablet, the couch, his truck. We would start over from zero if we had to, because Leo wasn't going to die. Not while I still had hands to work and people to ask. I looked at my son's pale face, the machines around him, the little dinosaur sticker still stuck to his sock from the day before. They wouldn't help us, so I would find people who would. 2 days later, Leo was still in the hospital, stabilized but fragile, the doctors urging us to act fast. We'd sold everything we could within hours. Amir's beloved truck that had taken us across 3 states after our wedding, my computer and design tools, the printer I used to draft floor plans. I even sold my engagement ring, quietly, without telling Amir. Still, we were only halfway there. The GoFundMe had started gaining some traction, but we needed more. We needed a miracle. And I knew, against all my better judgment, that there was one more door left to knock on. I told Amir I had to go somewhere. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Don't let them hurt you." It was a Saturday afternoon when I arrived at the Fairmont Winery, a sprawling estate nestled in the hills just outside Napa. The parking lot overflowed with black sedans and luxury SUVs. I could hear the sound of a string quartet playing something. Classical, elegant, distant. Brandon's engagement party was in full swing. The decorations were extravagant. Golden arches lined with white roses, fire pits surrounded by curated floral arrangements, waiters moving gracefully with trays of champagne flutes. I walked in unnoticed at first, dressed in black slacks and a plain coat, my hair pulled back. No makeup. Just a folder in my hands. Leo's medical documents, test results, and the hospital's estimate stapled on top. The moment my mother saw me, her smile faltered. She was standing beneath a canopy, holding a mimosa, surrounded by women in silk. She excused herself and approached me with a practiced grace, but her eyes were hard. "Julia," she said with a tight smile, "what are you doing here?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Mom, I need 5 minutes." "Not here," she hissed under her breath. "We're in the middle of something important." "This is important," I replied. "Leo's surgery is scheduled in less than 36 hours. We're still $58,000 short. Please, I'm not asking for luxury. I'm asking you to help save your grandson's life." She glanced around nervously, suddenly very aware of the people nearby. "Lower your voice," she whispered. "This is not the place to discuss these things. You're making a scene." "I brought his records," I said, opening the folder and holding them out. "Read them. Look at the doctor's note. He's in critical condition." She didn't even glance down. At that moment, my father appeared, followed by Brandon, dressed in a white linen suit, sunglasses perched on his head, a drink in hand. When he saw me, his lips curled into something like amusement. "Did you seriously come here to beg?" he said. "This is my engagement party, Julia, not a charity event." I looked at him, then at my parents. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Leo. You call yourselves grandparents, then prove it." My father's face hardened. "Don't do this here," he said. "You've always resented this family, and now you come here to embarrass us? This is not our responsibility." I stepped forward, heart pounding, voice shaking but clear. "If you can spend $2 million on a penthouse and another $50,000 on a vineyard party, you can save a child's life. You're choosing not to. That's not just selfish. That's cruel." A small silence fell over the immediate area. Guests turned to look. My mother's face turned pale. She leaned in and said, "You've made your point. Now leave before you ruin your brother's special day." I turned to Brandon. "You always had everything handed to you. This time, all I'm asking is that you help someone else." He laughed, sipping his drink. "I'm not the one who decided to freelance for a living and marry someone with no family money. You made your bed. Lie in it." It was the smirk that did it. The smug, unbothered smirk of someone who had never once in his life been told no. I turned back to my parents, swallowing the bitterness that threatened to choke me. "I came here hoping you'd prove me wrong," I said. "I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd see your grandson's life as worth more than a party. But now, I know." My mother looked like she wanted to cry. Not out of guilt, but out of the fear that someone might be watching. My father turned away. No one stopped me as I walked back down the gravel path toward my car. No one called after me. No one cared, but something inside me felt clearer than it had in years. This was no longer my family, not in the ways that mattered. They could toast their perfect son and sip imported champagne beneath rented chandeliers. They could laugh at speeches and take staged photos in golden light. But none of it would matter when the world saw them for who they truly were. Because I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. I wasn't going to protect their image while they let my son suffer. The final door had closed, and I wouldn't knock again. That night, I didn't sleep. I returned to the hospital with aching feet and a soul that felt scraped raw. Leo was still unconscious, his tiny chest rising and falling under the soft hum of machines. Amir sat by his side, eyes hollow, hand resting gently on Leo's arm. When I walked in, he looked up at me, question in his eyes, but I didn't speak. I just shook my head. No words were needed. The answer was clear. They had turned their backs. All of them. But what I didn't know then, what would unfold in the hours and days to come, was that family isn't always blood. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones who never owed you a thing. The first message came at dawn. My college roommate, Renee, had seen the GoFundMe through a mutual friend. We hadn't spoken in years. She'd moved to Oregon to teach music. But there it was, a $500 donation and a message that read, "For Leo, who deserves to grow up." I wish I could give more. I stared at the screen, tears stinging my eyes. That $500 might as well have been $5 million. It wasn't the amount. It was the love, the recognition, the gesture from someone who hadn't forgotten me. Within. The next few hours, more names started to appear. A barista I used to see daily when I worked from a cafe downtown. A couple I had helped redesign their bakery's seating area 2 years ago. A nurse from Leo's preschool. They gave $25, $60, $100, amounts they likely couldn't afford, but gave anyway. Amir's co-workers pooled together enough for another $200. Our neighbor, who had only spoken to us in passing about garbage pickup. Schedules, dropped off an envelope with $300 in cash and a note that simply read, "We're rooting for your boy." I broke down on the floor of the hospital waiting room, sobbing. Not because we were saved yet, but because for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Then came the unexpected. One of my former interns, Daniel, whom I had mentored through his first big project and hadn't spoken to in over a year, walked into the hospital with a check for $10,000. I was stunned. "I work in tech now," he said. "It's not a lot by their standards, but I know what Leo means to you. You helped me get my foot in the door. Let me do something for you." I didn't even have the strength to speak. I just hugged him. Some things are too sacred for words. Amir's parents, who lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Renton, called us and asked us to come over. When we arrived, they handed us a small brown envelope. Inside were the savings they had been quietly setting aside for when times get hard. They had even pawned a family heirloom, a gold necklace passed down from Amir's grandmother. "This is what family does," his mother said, gripping my hand. "You are our daughter, and Leo is our heart." In that moment, I realized love doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it doesn't come in big declarations or sweeping gestures. Sometimes it arrives in quiet sacrifice, in a trembling hand giving you everything they have. By the third day, we had raised nearly $79,000, still short, but hope is a living thing. It grows. A local journalist contacted me after seeing the campaign, shared on social media. She wanted to feature our story. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't interested in turning our pain into a spectacle. But she said something that struck me. "This isn't just about your son. This is about how communities step up when institutions fail. People need to be reminded that we're still capable of compassion." I agreed. The article ran the next morning. It was simple, human, heartfelt. No names of those who turned us away, no bitterness. Just a portrait of a boy who needed a chance to live, and a family who had tried everything. By sunset, donations surged. Then I got a call from someone I never expected, my old professor from architecture school. We'd lost touch after I graduated, but she had followed my career from afar. "I showed your story to my husband," she said. "He runs a foundation. We'd like to cover the remainder of Leo's medical costs. It's done." I dropped the phone. Amir caught me as my knees gave out. It was done. We had the money. We rushed to the hospital administrator with the news. The staff sprang into action, securing the surgical team and prepping Leo. As I signed the final consent forms, my hand trembling, I looked up at Amir. He didn't speak. He just nodded, the weight of relief in his eyes. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours that stretched into a lifetime. I sat in the waiting room with Leo's backpack in my lap, gripping the little dinosaur keychain he always carried. I prayed, out loud, silently, to anyone who would listen. When the doctor finally came out, his expression was calm. He nodded. "The surgery was successful. Leo's going to recover. He's strong." I cried then, not the silent tears of exhaustion. I sobbed, loud, shaking, uncontrollable. Amir held me, and I let go for the first time since that phone call. Since the moment I realized the people who gave me life wouldn't help me protect another life. 3 days later, I sat beside Leo's bed as he opened his eyes and whispered, "Hi, Mommy." His voice was raspy, but alive. I leaned in, kissed his forehead, and whispered back, "Hi, baby. You're safe now." And in that hospital room, surrounded by the quiet beeping of monitors and the warmth of Amir's hand in mine, I knew blood didn't make a family. Love did, and Leo would grow up knowing exactly what that meant. After Leo's surgery, the world didn't stop. It changed. Not in a dramatic fireworks kind of way, more like a subtle shift in gravity. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different. I was exhausted, yes, physically, emotionally, financially drained, but underneath that fatigue, a fire had begun to smolder. Quiet, steady, undeniable. We went home 2 weeks later. Leo was weak but healing. He carried a little stuffed triceratops wherever he went, wore a heart monitor patch under his shirt, and asked endless questions about his robot chest. Every breath he took felt like a small miracle. Amir returned to work part-time, easing into a rhythm, but I couldn't rest. Not yet. I sat at our kitchen table one morning, just me, my coffee, and a blank page. And I wrote. I didn't name names. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth. I wrote about what it meant to be turned away by your own blood, what it felt like to beg for your child's life and be met with silence. But I also wrote about kindness, about the neighbors, friends, and strangers who carried us, the intern who gave us his savings, the retired teacher who wrote a check, the parents who sold heirlooms without blinking. I posted it on my business blog, the same page I usually used for design tips and project updates. I called it, "When Family Fails, Love Still Finds a Way." I expected maybe a few clients would read it. Maybe someone would share it out of sympathy. I didn't expect it to go viral. By the end of the week, it had been shared over 70,000 times. My inbox flooded with messages. People sent their own stories of abandonment, of betrayal, of resilience. Some wrote just to say they cried. Some sent photos of their children, telling me they hugged them tighter after reading. And then came the media. A local news anchor emailed, asking for an interview. Then a parenting podcast. Then a women's leadership platform. They didn't want the scandal. They wanted the why. Why I kept going. Why I didn't let bitterness swallow me. I told them the same thing every time. I had no choice. My son needed me. My chosen family showed up. I owed it to them to become someone worthy of their belief. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A client I had once pitched, one of the ones who originally said I was too small scale, reached out. They'd read the article. Their CEO had cried. They wanted to offer me a contract, not for a home remodel or a coffee shop redesign, but for a new boutique hotel development in Vancouver. The budget? 7 figures. I remember staring at the screen, stunned. Amir read the email twice, then looked at me and smiled. They finally see what I've always seen. I took the job, not out of spite, not to prove anything. I took it because I had something to say now, through my work, through the spaces I created. I wanted to design places where people felt safe, seen, held. I poured every lesson into my sketches, every night beside Leo's bed, every conversation with our donors, every tear I shed in silence. The project took 6 months, and by the time it opened, Monroe Design Studio had become a name in the industry. My name. Not theirs, not my family's. Mine. Shortly after the hotel launch, I was invited to speak at a conference for women entrepreneurs in New York. I stood on stage in a navy jumpsuit, holding a photo of Leo in my hand. I looked out over a sea of faces, took a deep breath, and said, "Pain doesn't disappear when you ignore it, but it can be repurposed. It can be transformed." The applause wasn't what moved me. It was the stillness. The way the room leaned in. The way people nodded, eyes glassy, jaws set. After the talk, a woman approached me, middle-aged, tired but proud. She said, "My daughter doesn't speak to me. After hearing you, I think I understand why. Thank you." It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. The more success came, the less I thought about who hadn't supported me. The more love I received, the more distant their rejection felt. But I never forgot. Not out of hatred, but out of clarity. When Leo asked me one night why Grandma and Grandpa never visit, I didn't lie. I said, "They made choices that hurt us, but we are okay, because the people who truly love us, they stayed." He nodded, then asked for pancakes. That was enough. I rebuilt my business from the inside out. I hired intentionally women, people of color, second-chance applicants. I created a small grant for student designers who didn't have family support. I wasn't just building a company. I was building a legacy, and all of it, the contracts, the awards, the magazine spreads, none of it meant as much to me as one quiet afternoon when Leo stood at the edge of my office and said, "Mommy, I'm proud of you." That was it. That was everything. Turning pain into power doesn't mean pretending it never hurt. It means using the scar as a foundation. It means growing in the direction of sunlight, even when your roots remember the dark. I had lost a family, but I had found a voice, a mission, a purpose far louder than silence, and I knew I would never be invisible again. I didn't go looking for justice. But justice, I've learned, has a way of arriving when truth is given space to breathe. After the article, the interviews, and the viral response to my story, people began to connect the dots. I had never mentioned names, not my parents, not Brandon's, not even the business they proudly ran for decades. But small towns have sharp memories, and whispers have a way of becoming thunder when the silence breaks. It started slowly. A few online reviews of my parents' store began surfacing, then dozens, then hundreds. People wrote about the story. They'd read the speech I gave and their decision not to support a business that could fund opulence while turning its back on a sick child. Customers began canceling orders. Suppliers pulled out of long-standing contracts. The family name that once symbolized prestige was now met with quiet disapproval. Former acquaintances unfollowed. Business partners distanced themselves. My mother, who once prided herself on her place in the local social circuit, stopped being invited. Brandon took the fall the hardest. His engagement, so heavily photographed and celebrated, began to unravel. His fiancée, once the darling of their circle, quietly deleted every trace of him online. A few weeks later, the wedding was canceled. No official statement. Just silence. Then, one night, I received an email from my mother. The subject line read, "We need your help." She wrote that their business was on the brink of collapse. The bank was calling in loans. Brandon hadn't been able to find work since the fallout. "We've made mistakes," she wrote, "but we're still your family. Please, if there's anything you can do." I stared at the message for a long time, and then I responded. I told her I would help. I would write the check, but on one condition. She and my father would come to my office and accept the money in person. 2 days later, they did. They looked smaller than I remembered. My mother's hair had more gray. My father's posture had softened. I handed them the check, and before they could speak, I said, "Take this. But after today, we are finished. No more calls, no more visits. I release you, and I free myself." They left without a word, and for the first time, I truly felt free. Healing doesn't always look like a reunion. Sometimes it's a boundary, a line drawn not out of anger, but out of clarity. People often say forgiveness is for you, not them. But what they don't tell you is that peace doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away and choosing to build something better from the ground up. I've learned that not everyone who shares your blood will share your values, and not everyone who claims to love you will stand beside you when it matters. But love, real love, the kind that shows up in hospital rooms, gives without asking, and sacrifices without applause, that love will always find you. If you've ever stood at that same crossroads between loyalty and survival, know this. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It's brave. And if you're still learning how to let go with grace, you're not alone. I see you. And I promise there is life, rich, beautiful, fulfilling life, on the other side of letting go. What would you have done in my place? Would you have helped the parents who once abandoned you? Let me know in the comments. I truly want to hear your story. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Your story might just be the one someone else needs to hear.